Excellent. Thank you for grabbing the mic right away. If you want to keep
Yep,
your mic muted for
sure.
just a moment. Uh, Hello, Mrs. Doubtfire. We're gonna, just see if the room populates just a little bit more. I'm gonna post some things up to the nest for just a moment, and well, maybe I'll. So this is an interview style space. So William, you and I will be having a discussion like we did last week, which was very well received. I think we had about 500 live, but now it has been seen almost or listened to at least almost 900 times. So and it was our first space together. So once people get used to how this how this is rolling and all that, hopefully, but there's been a lot of interest tonight. We're up against Thursday night football and a massive hurricane. So hold on for just a moment. Mrs. Doubtfire, how are you this evening? Oh, maybe she can't grab her mic yet. Let me post a couple things to the nest quick.
I'm fine. I'm dealing with a sassy little dog right now.
Oh, okay, got you. All right. Okay, I'm struggling with posting to the nest right now, so that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and we'll get started. Welcome, William Ramsey, to our space. And we are have chosen to discuss the children of the beast. And the reason for that, for me, is because I see the influence of Aleister Crowley everywhere. And I am going to be pulling up some links. I did, I did watch Lucifer Rising today and was quite shocked at the jacket. So I'll be posting a picture of that. So William, let's start out with background about Aleister Crowley. I'm not sure even everyone understands who that man is. So go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Dori. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be back with you again. Aleister Crowley was born Edward Crowley. He was born in 1875. He died in 1947. He was the only son of a very wealthy family. He grew up in a kind of elite subsection of the Plymouth Brethren. They called themselves the Exclusive Brethren. Both of his parents were very religious. They were followers of Darby, if you know of Darby. So he remembers a very religious upbringing. And as the only son of very wealthy parents, his parents sold beer and things for pubs all over England. So they had a solid income. And he went to the best schools, and they called them public schools in the UK. Essentially, they were private schools, but it was almost kind of like Pink Floyd's One Another Brick in the Wall. Very violent. He almost died. There was bullying and harassment, and he actually had to go back home and into the care of tutors. And he was very privileged. His father died at 14. He really liked his father and didn't care of his mother that much, and kind of care became under the oversight of his uncle, who he called a tyrant. But he was very intelligent. He was able to get into Cambridge. And really, at that time, he was among all these other very accomplished people. There was a future king of England and other poets and other famous people there. So he really determined himself he was going to be one of these luminaries like them. And at that time in college, he took up an interest in mountain climbing and poetry and magic. So at kind of a younger age, that was kind of his interests. And he led him on. He was kind of rebelled against Christianity, and he wrote in one of his autobiographies, or his autobiography called Confessions, that he didn't want to get in touch with Satan merely. He wanted to become his chief of staff. So I think that from a very early age, that was kind of the road he was going to travel in his life, which he did his entire life. Some people call him a dabbler. I would call him a scholar of the occult, really, who didn't just read everything, but kind of created his own religion. And he called that religion Thelema, which is a Greek word for will. And really, the kind of what he called his most important moment of his life wasn't his wife or his children. He had 5 children he kind of neglected, and different women he would eventually call the scarlet women, who he would kind of energetically use up and discard. But the most important time of his life, or event in his life, was this event that happened in Egypt. He was with his wife Kelly at the time, who eventually would go insane. But it was the receipt, he said, from an entity he called AWAS, of this book called the Book of the Law, and it happened in, I think, April 8th, 9th, and 10th of 1904. And he said there was a figure over his shoulder that dictated him this 3-part book, and it would eventually become the centerpiece. He spent a lot of time trying to decipher it, supposedly, and made it kind of a centerpiece of Thelema. And even in his kind of Gnostic Mass, there is this Book of the Law, is really the centerpiece in this kind of altar that resembles, he took kind of got inspiration from Orthodox
William,
Christianity. Yes.
let me stop you one moment. I want to back up just for a moment, and I want us to state the definition of what this kind of magic is. It's ritual magic, it's black magic, but the definition of magic, I'm going to try and paraphrase and then you can come back, piggyback on that. It is the influence of natural forces in nature in accordance with the will. Is that it in a nutshell? You can say it better, I bet.
Yeah, I think so. I think Crowley would distill it just like that. It's to make change in conformance with will. That's the whole idea of magic, yeah. But a ritual and
Yep.
ceremonial, right? So there's a lot of ceremony. And he learned a lot of it through this group called the Golden Dawn, which was kind of an elite post-Masonic. So you go through the Masonic system and then go into this kind of higher magical system that was kind of exclusive. And Crowley would eventually be kicked out and would be in conflict with one of its main founders, McGregor Mathers, but after learning all he could about them. And so that was the kind of stuff he played. But it's definitely black magic. I wouldn't even call it, anything other than that is really what he was involved in.
Yeah, it's very dark, and that's that's also part of the reason I don't think people really understand. There's a huge difference between a stage magician and tricks and an illusionist, et cetera, et cetera. Although they're imparting their will into the illusion of the trick, David Copperfield, right?
Right.
Right. So I just want to make the distinction that magic is a system whereby you create or craft rituals that you perform in a circle drawn on the floor with symbols and different implements. You set your intention for what you want to manifest out of this ritual. It took him 6 months usually to craft a ritual. And I believe the Babylon working, which is a pretty famous ritual now because of who was involved, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. I believe he worked that for at least a month. Didn't he work his spells for a month?
Parsons and Hubbard would go out every day for, I think, 2 weeks. Yeah, so that was the Babylon working. What you're referring to is Crowley's Abramelin the Mage ritual that he did up at Bulliskin Manor, which is on Loch Ness. And it was supposed to take 6 months. He didn't finish it, but he said that there was like a, negative spiritual response, like he was visited by ghosts. And supposedly Bulliskin Manor is still haunted to this day. But just to go back to Crowley's definition of magic, it is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. That would be his kind of axiom, so to speak.
Perfect. So at Bullskin Manor, after Abra Mellon, and I would encourage everyone to go to William Ramsey Investigates on Patreon. Pay the $5. Watch this man's documentaries. They're very organized. They're very well done. He 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 writes in such a way that it's easy to follow, easy to understand, and you take each person that he influenced or situations that he influenced, and you really give great details. So I definitely encourage everyone to do that, and I will be putting a link for that up in the nest this evening too. So I watched Children of the Beast twice actually, and I also watched Aleister Crowley, Prophet of Evil, and my notebook is fat. But after he did the Abramelin, he claimed and even took photographs that he had shadow people
Yes.
on his. Yeah, he had shadow people. Now I wonder about the Loch Ness monster because
Right.
right.
Right. So, I
Be,
mean, if
yeah,
you
go ahead.
believe in kind of the cryptid idea, these are entities that like cross over from another plane or something and go back. Much like ghosts, I guess, is the same thing. But yeah.
Right. And so then he really was a prolific writer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
Just to
yeah,
add, I
go
think
ahead.
he really wanted to be, Dory, like one of the most famous writers and well respected writers of his era as a journalist or an author. And he put out tons of books. One was Moonchild, lots of fiction. There was one called Simon Elf, was his attempt to kind of break into the true crime fiction type stuff. So he was always producing a lot of articles. Some for, like, people know Vanity Fair, that magazine's still around. He wrote for them in the time of the World War One. He never got lauded as much as he wanted to be. I think he was always considered a second or third rate journalist, author, and poet. But he really wanted to be the top. But he did. He got, there were some very famous people who admired his work. But for some reason, he also was a type of person who was more interested in volume than refining his work and making it more powerful, or making it something more artful. He would like literally finish his books and just shelf it and then move on to the next one. So
Yes, I would say though that he definitely was not a dabbler.
yeah.
Okay, he took everything very seriously, and he has some numbers attached to him, and particularly the number 11. And I would really like to talk about that. Even his Reedy, which you can say is 11 words, and you just go through with his whole thing about 11, if you would please.
Sure, yeah, and it's interesting because, like, you made that distinction between kind of parlor magic and then ceremonial magic. He spelled his version of magic at the end with a K, and K is the 11th letter of the English alphabet, right? But 11 kind of was a very important number in the Golden Dawn that he was involved with, right? So there was this book that one of the founders, his name was Westcott, but it was numbers there, occult power and mystic virtue. I'm reading from Children of the Beast. And he said, upon the number of 11, this seems to have been the type of number with an evil reputation among all peoples. The Kabbalists contrasted it with the perfection of the decad, or 10. And just the Sephirotic number is the form of all good things. So 11 is the essence that all is sinful, harmful, and imperfect. With the 10 Sephiroth, they contrasted the 11 averse Sephiroth, symbols of destruction, violence, defeat, and death. So I think that's where he got his start. And then the concept of the 11 kind of pervaded all of his work. So he would try, as like a magician does, to kind of correspond or use these numbers to enhance magical power and workings and things like that. So 11 shows up in the book of the law. there's a phrase in there: "We are of the number of 11, and 11 is the number of us." And so 11 just became kind of this kind of key number, not just for him, but for magicians in general. So his kind of another of his axioms is "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." So this kind of notion of will, well, that's 11 syllables, right? 11 words, 11 syllables. So a lot of these kind of things correlate to this number 11, and repeated through a lot of his work and his magical work as well.
So I went to H11 in the Strong's Concordance because that's just something I do. So the Strong's Concordance is the Hebrew and Greek concordance that you can use when you um, look at a Bible that has. Well, there's an online one called Blue Letter Bible, and each word has a number. So I went to H because all of these tomes, and he did start the only, you mentioned his father was very great friends with Darby, and the only book that Alistair was allowed to read at home was the Bible. So I went and looked up H11, and it is Abaddon, the beast from the bottomless pit.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, and it's a kind of an interesting thing. So he's very familiar. He could have been a biblical scholar if he wanted to. He really did know the Bible, but he interpreted everything, took from the book of Revelation a lot of the darker elements, and really wanted to bring them to life. So he incorporated kind of the notions of the beast, who he would considered himself the beast, and then his females, the scarlet women, kind of as his kind of magical workers, or ceremonial partners in magic. And so those were all incorporated into his life, believe it or not. So he had this kind of, like they have in the book of Revelation, the concept of the mark of the beast. So he created his own mark of the beast and literally branded his scarlet women with it, like very dark. So, and you can actually see pictures of these women with this kind of like a cattle brand on their chest of the mark of the beast.
Yes, I can't remember the one lady's name in particular, but there's quite you show quite a
View.
revealing.
Yeah.
Yes, in your book. Yeah. So another thing that I want to mention about the way that you say he used women for his rituals. His magic was steeped in what's known as sex magic, and uh, a lot of disgusting body fluids, just so everyone knows, a lot of disgusting body fluids and really disgusting practices are done because the idea is to be profane. The demons love, the entities love profanity, aberrant sexual behavior. So, I mean, he engaged in cropophagia, however you say that, cropophagia, or, which is having someone defecate in your mouth. You know, Urination. He gives the kind of hierarchy of what blood is the best and what is the second best, and et cetera, et cetera. So the more profane you can be, which he also advocated bestiality and did that with his scarlet women, his whores of Babylon, and he spelled Babylon without the Y. And I just think it's really important for people to know how deep this runs, and that the the dark side, the entities that he was contacting, and this sort of thing, they love anything that's, well, antichrist, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what he even mentions cattle a lot, I noticed in his writings. Um, and God is fond of cattle, and it's cattle. The word cattle is mentioned in a positive sense over 130 times in the Bible, at least King James Bible. So he was constantly against, God, I guess. So, can you talk a little bit more about some of the rituals he performed with his women? And can you also talk about his children and what happened to them, please?
Yeah, so some of the rituals, like we know of some because people were at his magical community called the Temple of Thelema that was in Sicily. So they've seen some of his rituals, and you can see that, you talk about the stuff painted on the floor. People have dug up and like cleaned off and saw that he made this ceremonial magical kind of drawing on the floor to conduct his rituals. And Leah Herzig was the one who was branded, and there was stories about dead cats and goats that had their throats slit. Very graphic stuff. But the women were involved in all kinds of different. And there were, I mean, we can get in very graphic detail, but basically, like you talked about this whole sexual magic, he kind of moved from the ceremonial magic of the Golden Dawn and started incorporating drugs and sex. And so then his rituals all involved all that stuff. So, I mean, that's kind of like the topical. And a lot of his ritual, like Liber 66 and things like that, they all are in veiled language, symbolic language, but they're almost all involved sex magic of one type or another. So that's it. And these women, I think there was 11 or 12 total scarlet women that he had over his lifetime that we know of, who became kind of like, it was like an elevated position, I guess, in the occult to be Crowley's Scarlet Woman. But all of them see a suicide, insane. Leah Herzig ended up being a prostitute. He abandoned her for another woman, became a prostitute in the streets of Paris. And some of these pictures are very interesting of the women because you can see the before and after of a number of them, including Herzig, who before she met Crowley was kind of a young, beautiful, vivacious looking woman. And by the time he was done, she looked haunted and thin-lipped and truly traumatized, like PTSD. So there's a lot of really dark stories. Like I said, his first wife Kelly, like their daughter died, not mysteriously, but she died, and then she entered into a mental institution. So and that's kind of a consistent theme of Crowley and his relationships: suicide, madness, degradation, and he just thought it was his will to follow whatever he wanted to, regardless of whether he hurt anybody's life, or he just didn't care. And he had 5 kids. I think he said about one of his daughters, like, she'll make a good prostitute. So um there's just really dark things he said about his own kids. One, when he was later on in his life, when he was in southern England, he had this woman whose last name was McAlpine, and she said, I want you to, you know, be the father of my child. So he became the father, and he named the son Ataturk, who kind of ended up being like a homeless vagabond who dressed up in strange clothes like Crowley and acted very eccentric, actually. But there's pictures and articles about this Ataturk Crowley in kind of London in that area. So none of them really turned out. There was interesting, like some of the survivors of Crowley who were like Leah Herzig's daughter. Some of them got away and ended up in Northern California. One who lived a long, healthy life away from Crowleyites and stuff ended up in Oakland. So there was there's a long history of people who kind of dispersed from Crowley. But yeah, the women, they didn't end well for a lot of the women.
Yeah. So all right. So years and years after Crowley dies, he literally becomes like the god of the sexual revolution. And Charles Manson, Bobby Bouzoulet, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you think he got so popular with pop culture in the 60s?
I think it was his promise. So I think a lot of people after the 50s were had this kind of spirit of rebellion in both the UK and the US. And I think it was a resurgence. I think they're cyclical interest in the occult. It goes through cycles, like burns out. Like in the 70s, there wasn't that much interest after the 60s because of Manson and all the dark stuff that happened. But I think Crowley had that promise of uh, what he thought of self-realization. There was the sex, the drugs, his concept of freedom. And I think it fit in with the kind of hippie lifestyle of people rebelling against Vietnam War and kind of what they considered the rigidity of the 50s of their parents. So I think Crowley was, he found a fertile ground to have an influence. And I think that he even said that, the birth of the child, he was trying to create aeonic change, 1,000-year change. And his thing would be the child of Horus, right? His era. And he said it would happen in the 60s. And sure enough, it kind of did. And he had proselytizers who spread his kind of evil gospel. And one of them was Leary. A lot of people don't know this about Timothy Leary, but he thought he was carrying on the work of Aleister Crowley. He said as much. And he actually went to places where Crowley did ritual magic in Algeria and supposedly summoned entities. He had Crowley's I Ching sticks. He did Crowley's tarot deck. So he was, and all the drugs, of course, and sex and everything that Leary was involved in, and all his friends. He was much like this kind of cultural revolutionary that Crowley was. And though he was more of kind of LSD didn't exist at the time of Crowley. Crowley used the scientific name was anhelonium, which is basically not mushrooms but peyote. So he would dose people with peyote. But Leary's peyote was LSD. So there are similarities. There are 60s was fertile ground for musicians, filmmakers, like you talked about, Lucifer Rising. So one of the interesting things is this kind of tie between Kenneth Anger and Crowley, and then the Manson family. Like there's direct ties, and the Manson family was so influential in a dark way that you can trace. I mean, through Scientology as well, you can trace Crowley's influence all the way up through the 60s to the present, really.
Okay, Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, and Jack Parsons. Let's go there.
Yeah, so Crowley, his writing, but Jack Parsons was a guy who lived in Pasadena, and he was friends with a lot of other kind of cultural figures. But Aleister Crowley called John Parsons or Jack Parsons his most important follower, and he headed the OTO Agape Lodge and had all kinds of people. He lived in this large mansion that had a lot of rooms, so he could basically, house a lot of different people, and he did. And one of the people that he housed after the war was L. Ron Hubbard. He became friends with him. They practiced magic together. You mentioned the Babylon working. They drove out to the desert and did that. Um, so that seemed to be a right thing. And the whole idea of the Babylon working was to really change the culture. That was the whole idea, is to kind of bring in this new age, this new satanic age. And Parsons mysteriously died in a explosion in Pasadena. And then kind of Hubbard, after running
Hold
off.
on. Now, Jack Parsons, for anyone in here who doesn't know, that's JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories. Jack Parsons founded that, which then became NASA, right?
Yes, I mean it went through that. That's right, and he actually would call this guy who was paper clipped, which was the kind of one of the heads of the NASA space program. What was his last name? It was, I can't even remember right now. But the German guy who headed NASA, Parsons would call him on the phone, so he was like close personal friends in the same area, really. Uh,
Werner von Braun.
Thank you, Werner von Braun. So there's weird overlaps between Parsons, and one of the interesting things about Parsons is they would do these scientific tests in this arroyo outside of Pasadena, and they would call it the Suicide Squad. And when the rockets would take off, or the jet, assisted, they called it jet assisted takeoff. When some of these, like the implements, took off, he would recite Aleister Crowley's Hymn to Pan, probably his most famous poem. But it was the Suicide Squad. It was him and a couple other guys. Well, one of those other guys, his son married one of the Robert Maxwell daughters, so it's like a weird connection. So,
What?
yeah,
What?
yeah,
Really?
yes.
Oh my God. See, when I said this was all connected with what's going on right now, it really, really is. Um, at the end of Lucifer Rising, they conjure a mass. There's at least four of them that end up showing up at the end, UFOs.
Right.
So this is a really, really, really important topic. And because Scientology, is basically a UFO religion, right? Can you talk a little bit more about just that aspect a minute?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really kind of a um, space opera religion, right? Because there's supposedly people from another planet and seeded this planet, and there's another entity or whatever. Like, it's pretty remarkable stuff that is involved in this whole thing. But I'm trying to figure out what the names of these other guys were that he was involved with. I'll have to go back and look through my book. I can't remember the names. But yeah, Scientology, it there are stories about um Scientology. It was called Dianetics in 1948, and then 1950 Hubbard called it um Scientology. Molina was his name. So look up Molina. That was one of the members of the Suicide Squad. Molina's son is married to one of the Ghislaine Maxwell's sisters. Um, so uh, the, the Scientology, there's insight into Scientology from L. Ron Hubbard's son. He was supposed to be his kind of like protege, and he was with his dad right at the beginning. And he had to change his name, and he lived under very secretive. Like, I think he was afraid of going against the kind of Scientology um, kind of cult. And he said his dad would basically had a lot of Crowley material and would actually like group all the materials of Crowley together and read them before his lectures that he would have. And there's actually kind of not famous, but there's audio of Hubbard mentioning Crowley, and I include to kind of the text of that audio. But he literally talks about Crowley as a magician, calls him the Great Beast, and Hubbard in some other. I mean, he's clearly a magician. Crowley, Hubbard studied hypnotism and magic and things like that, and did some very dark ritual stuff. I included in the book, but Scientology can be seen as kind of carrying on the Crowleyan secret society tradition, where you go up the grades, right? Well, what Hubbard did was kind of monetize that. So he like whereas Crowley went broke later on in his life, they called Scientology the Church of Greed because you had to pay to supposedly get your insight and inspiration through the Scientology texts. And Hubbard was clearly kind of like a cult figure. He was known as the source, and a lot of dark people, like a lot of deaths and dark things happened around Scientology. They actually had their own intelligence unit. They sue people all the time. They were anti-psychiatry. I mean, it's just really something else. And I think that Hubbard took after Crowley as well, as where he did a lot of drugs and sex and stuff like that.
Yep, I would agree with that. And let's see, isn't there one interview somewhere, an obscure interview with Jack Parsons' son?
There might be. I'm not aware of that.
Okay,
I didn't
before
even
he
know he
went
had a son.
underground.
So
Go ahead, say that again.
I didn't know he had a son. I know that there was a like a 6-part series that was made about Parsons. So, and I
Oh,
think,
excuse me, I meant L. Ron Hubbard's
oh,
son. Was there an interview with him before
yes,
he went underground? That's what I meant.
yes.
I'm sorry, I mixed those two up. I interchange Parsons and Hubbard all the time. Sorry.
It's okay. No, there's actually video of him around. So you can see that. There used to be a lot of videos of his son. The problem is trying to figure out his name and what he changed. I think he changed it, and he had articles. I think back in the day they didn't have the internet, so you couldn't just post stuff. So there were interviews with the son in either like one of the skin mags, like Playboy or something like that. But you have to
Oh, William, we just lost your sound.
Yeah, sorry, there was like
Okay.
some alert on my phone.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, you have to figure. I think it was DeLarge or DeLong or what, something like that, is what his fake name was. But they're online. You have to just look it up. The Sun,
Okay.
Ron Jr. Yeah,
Yep. All right. That's good. Now, another thing that I want to have you discuss a little more is Crowley was bisexual, and he had a transvestite lover that he lived with for 6 months called
that's right.
Jerome Pollitt, right?
Yeah,
And they refer to him as an androgyne, right? And
right.
Genesis P. Orridge too is androgyne. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Crowley kind of went through a phase as his poetry phase, but it was almost like something like Interview with a Vampire, where they had that flowery clothes. But he had a relationship, like you said, this guy Pollitt, when he was at Cambridge. And so that was kind of like a decadent almost phase that he went through, these kind of poetic poetry decadence and stuff. And then he went on to like describe this entity as an androgyne, as Lucifer, this androgyne, and it carried on through Genesis B. Orridge, who called himself a pandrogyne, which is a positive androgyne, right? And so, like this androgyny, you can see in our common culture, right? So I think that it's not a mistake. It may not be seen that often, but like two spirit, which is this kind of weird, kind of new pronouns, is synonymous with androgyny, right? So like you literally having it go through the common culture of the present today, which all this other weird stuff is crazy. But yeah, so there's kind of a statement from Magic and Theory and Practice, and it's where Crowley admits that this entity who sent, who dictated the book of the law to him, he admits is, the devil.
Yes, absolutely. Lamb, right?
Lamb. Well, no, Lamb was a different entity.
Oh,
Lamb was
okay.
an entity that he did through one of his workings, and that was called the not the Babylon working. It was called, there was a
Alamantra.
yeah, Alamantra working. That was the one in New York that he did, where he summoned this entity.
So I think it's important that the Baphomet symbol is an androgynous figure, and the goal of the magician, the adept, the goal is to embody both male and female in yourself, which I believe Crowley really influenced this. The thing that we're seeing right now with the trans, and androgyny has
Yes.
always been the goal of the adept, and now they're influencing young people to take that on.
Yeah. No. If I can read, this is from Magic and Theory and Practice. Probably one of the most important quotations of Crowley, who veiled a lot of his language in symbolism and stuff, but this is it. He says, the B666 has preferred to let names stand as they are and to proclaim simply that Awaz, the solar phallic hermetic Lucifer, is his own holy guardian angel, and the devil, Satan or Hadid, of our particular unit of the starry universe. This serpent, Satan, is not the enemy of man, right? So this is Luciferianism. He's not the enemy of man, but he who made us gods of our race, right? Ye shall be as gods. That's back in the Garden of Eden. Made gods of our race, knowing good and evil. He bade know thyself and taught initiation. He is the devil of the book of Thoth. His emblem is Baphomet, the androgyne, who is the hieroglyph of arcane perfection. So there it is, the androgyne.
Yes. I was just looking for a picture of Iwas, Mrs. Or Iwas, whatever he called him, because it looks remarkably like a gray alien,
Right.
but the eyes aren't as big.
Well, it's fascinating you say that because he painted that portrait in 1918. So he preceded the whole UFO craze by a good, 20, 25 years.
Yes,
And that's
and
provable. Like you can prove like this is in the equinox. This is his kind of magical encyclopedia.
yes, and that's a big component of what we're dealing with right now with disclosure. And what are these things? And when you go back and you watch this, well, Lucifer Rising is about a 28-minute film, and the soundtrack is mostly composed by Bobby Bouzoulet, who people may remember from the Manson family, although Bobby got arrested a couple of days before the Sharon Tate murders for killing Gary Hinman. But Bobby hung out. He was a musician. He was also one of Kenneth Anger's lovers, and the soundtrack was composed and played from prison. The prison orchestra, where Bobby
Wow.
Bouzoulet is a prisoner, is where he composed, and the prison orchestra performed the soundtrack for Lucifer Rising. Lucifer Rising is free on YouTube, and there is no dialogue. It's all music, and I will say it is very artistic. But you can really see these themes, that we're talking about. And then of course there's, the big reveal of the picture of Crowley and them taking the book off the shelf. And of course the page they open to is the god Pan copulating with another goat. So there we have that dark, bestiality thing in there. And oh my gosh, what is it with what is it with people? Like now we have sex trafficking, and we had, I think Jeffrey Epstein was the tip of the iceberg. Now, Diddy has been doing some bad stuff. This whole hotline, I know you have a cult Hollywood too, but how do people get to the point to where they want to participate and be interested in this?
It's a good question. I think it probably is cumulative. They just seek more and more thrills and more drugs and more different types of sex and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of what Crowley offered. And apparently in Hollywood, sex magic is the norm. Like it's not like some kind of rarefied thing. Like people do that. That's what they do to try to maximize their self realization or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that Lucifer Rising is important for a lot of reasons. Jimmy Page was supposed to do the music. Anger and Page is a huge Crowley follower, right? Doing all kinds of magic, writing,
Yeah, and
doing
he bought Bullskin.
yeah, all that stuff. But Bullskin, he competed with Anger to buy Crowley's kind of memorabilia at art auctions. He says he practices magic, but they had a falling out. And one of the interesting things about Bouzoulet is that he lived with Anger at this place they call the Russian embassy. It's kind of off. It was off of the Haight Ashbury, closer to the Haight Ashbury. But they lived together, and he talked about first person events with Anger, like magical experiences, like that he was a warlock and things like that. So it ties Anger to the Manson family, like you said. He was associated with the Gary Inman death, uh, supposedly killed on orders of Manson for money and drugs. But it is fascinating, all of these kind of connections into our larger culture. And also the guy who played Horus in the Lucifer Rising, his name was Donald Cammell. And it's another tie between Crowley and all these other famous people. He did this movie Performance, which, according to the British kind of film history guides, is one of the top 100 movies ever made in Britain. And it's kind of like almost their Eyes Wide Shut of the 60s. Androgyny and homosexuality and just esotericism and occultism. And Camel wasn't just an admirer of Crowley. He literally sat on Crowley's knee when he was a young boy, because his father was a Scottish writer and poet who wrote a biography about Crowley and was friends with Crowley. So Crowley actually wrote this guy Camel's horoscopes. Well, I don't think they're extant anymore, but we know that there's a record of it. And then Camel goes on to being friends with all these other, Anne Heche, strangely, did a movie with Anne Heche and Christopher Walken, and this performance movie with Mick Jagger. And it's just absolutely incredible that these guys are connected. And then in Lucifer Rising. So you just see this kind of culture of Crowley. And I think that's what the kind of why I wrote Children of the Beast, not just for my own interest, but just to show how pervasive Crowley is in the common kind of culture.
So for me, and you've interviewed me before, and other podcasters have interviewed me in the past for my testimony from going from, I'm just going to say it, the dark side to Jesus Christ actually chasing me down in a ritual. And I've recently ran into someone who also had him start Jesus showing up, and she knew that it was him, and I did too. I knew it was a real thing, and I ran hard in the other direction. I didn't get to the point where I was into bestiality and child sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. Thank God. But I did the planetary hours with in accordance with the rituals that I did, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is that I think, along this path, as you get deeper and deeper, and, as an adept, you go further and further until, what you're doing is manifesting, and it's manifesting in this plane. And then, it's like you're required to keep fulfilling the dark side's requests of you. And once you balk at that and say no, then they turn on you and they begin to attack you viciously and mercilessly. And that is eventually what drove me to my knees. And uh, I asked to be saved from this. And thank God I was, because now I'm looking at all this and I'm going, wow. So the next thing I want to go into here a little bit is there is a replica of Aleister Crowley's altar. The dimensions are exact. It's an exact replica of Crowley's ceremonial altar, and it is housed in the meditation room at the UN.
Get out.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And Crowley talks about communicating with the secret chiefs. Okay. The secret chiefs are what they are calling right now non human intelligences, and the global the UN through Lucis Trust is housed in the UN. It's the education arm of the UN. And these people, this group, since the 1920s, since Alice Bailey came along, have been communicating and taking directives from, much like Crowley did, do this, go do this, go, And Crowley called them the secret chiefs. They're also known as the Great White Brotherhood, the White Lodge, Ascended Masters, Avatars, etc., etc. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, Crowley's actually, he didn't really care for many other people in the cult, but some of the people that he liked or drew from was McGregor, Mathers. But surprisingly, one of the others was Blavatsky. And he included kind of one of her core texts in his like must reads for his followers. I think it was The Voice in the Silence was the name of it. And she had that, she was kind of the predicate before Bailey and some of these other characters, the So I think that he had all this kind of secret chief, secret gods ideas. And he definitely was always trying to contact entities. And it wasn't just Aiwass. He was always praying to Aiwass and things like that. But there were other entities, the one he called the magician in Italy. And then you have to talk about the entity or demon he contacted through John Dee's kind of things in Algeria, Busada, this oasis in the middle of the desert when he was with his kind of one of his hapless followers. Um, so I think that those are all there, and I think that he was always kind of trying to emulate them. He always wanted to kind of be the world teacher, and he was in conflict with other kind of occultist lead beater and stuff where they tried to make this Indian elite
He
Brahmin.
he declared himself the
Yes,
Maitreya.
yeah, he did. They tried to make this other kid. It was a Jiddu Krishnamurti was his name, who ended up in California of all places. But yeah, so Crowley wanted to be the world teacher or the Maitreya. He never really kind of made it, but he did make it to kind of the top of the global occult hierarchy. I think he stayed there too.
Okay. Mrs. Doubtfeiser, go ahead because I think we're about at the point. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, everybody listening, if you're enjoying the space, go ahead and share it out. Get your questions ready because Dory's going to open it up for some questions here in a little while. And
Actually, yeah, you can put your requests in now.
okay.
That's just if you have a question, go ahead and send them, and Mrs. Doubtfire will vet you just a little bit, and then we'll get you a mic and let you ask William some questions. So I just find this whole now that it's come out from the government that we've been in communication with non-human intelligences, non-human entities for years and years. Uh, it's captivating to me because when I was in the thick of it, I was being taught by the person that was the head of the working group that I was in, um, the meditations and the way to contact the Order of Melchizedek, the White Lodge, the secret chiefs. And I was given the books, the secret materials to do that, and I did it. So this stuff is not imaginary. That's the other point I wanted to make. It's not imaginary. It's very real. If you mess around with this kind of stuff, you may be really surprised what shows up in your house, on your doorstep, whatever, things like that. But I'm just really the convergence of technology and magic with a K is happening in real time right now. And that's why these conversations, in my opinion, with William are very important. And in his book, Children of the Beast, he goes through the list of the people that, and we've talked about some of them that were influenced by Crowley. And famously, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the uh, album cover, Crowley is on it. Or right, William?
That's correct. Yes, he's in the back. He's bald at the time, but yeah, he's in there.
So he's influenced, bands, of course, Led Zeppelin, right? And is so talk a little bit more about Aleister Crowley's favorite numbers, 11. Well, we talked about 11, 93, and 77.
Yeah, 93 is a specific kind of numerological reference to Crowley. He believed in the Kabbalah, and then a subset of the Kabbalah is called the Gematria, where you take the value of words and transfer it into a numerical meaning. So each number or letter has a numerical value. And what he found is that kind of his two top words in Greek, thelema and agape, will and love, added up to the number 93. And so one of his phrases was, love under law, love under will. And so he ended up signing his documents instead of writing that out, he would just shorthand it with 93, 93, 93. So you'll see people do that. Like there's a document from Jimmy Page where he signs his letters like that in the Crowley style. So 93 is very specific to Crowley. And then 77 is also kind of a number that can be traced to Crowley and Satanism in general. Like you talked about the word Babylon, that he talked about he spelled it differently than Bab with a Y. He spelled it that way because it equaled out in gematria to 77. So that was very important to them. And it also represents half of the formulation of sexual magic. And 77 is also the infernal names of the devil in the Satanic Bible. So it's very important. But it represents the goat, like you talked about the goat or Capricorn. And it actually is also Oz, believe it or not. Like 77 and Oz are the same numbers. He said the sublime and supreme septenary is its mature magical manifestation through matter. So 77 was important to him. And then you can't forget 175. That was one of his rituals you used to invoke a deity by adoration. So I think that it's an invocation instead of evocation, where you bring something out of yourself. You're trying to bring something outside of yourself into yourself. So he talks about it. In that way. I include that in this book and Prophet of Evil. So just so people can kind of understand the references.
Yes, and I would love to talk about, if we do another space, which I really would like to, continue these, if possible. I'd like to drill down a little bit more into Prophet of Evil, maybe next time when we get
Okay.
together, 'cause these numbers are really important. And the thing that you just said about adoration, I think that's the people who have this adoration for gematria. It's a slippery slope. That's all I'm saying. But then again, I have to be really careful because I'm a defector from from them, and then they're I get I get threats for like these spaces. Sometimes I get told to be quiet, but it's not time to be quiet. It's time for us to bring all of this out because it is connected to disclosure and UFOs and UAP and
Right.
right, sex trafficking and Hollywood. And I was in a space last night with interviewing Game Tech Politics, and he said all of Hollywood is voluntarily MK Ultra'd for, the power and fame.
Right.
So the other dangerous thing is the love of power and money and
Right.
what you'll do for it.
Right. And I think that's what Crowley promised, was to kind of like be totally selfish and accrue to yourself whatever you want. So I think that that's also the kind of thing that overlaps with the Hollywood ethos. It's kind of like you use people up, kind of like Crowley did. The slave shall serve was one of Crowley's famous axioms that comes out of the Book of the Law. So I think the attitude, and Crowley, interestingly, they talk about him in the magical sense, but he really was kind of a philosopher, and he had a political program as well. And he, believe it or not, believed that feudalism was the optimal social political system. And you mentioned the cattle earlier in this talk. Like one of the more famous things he said famous things I think he said was that in addition to the slave shall serve, he says, we'll raise the cattle and feed them and get rid of them whenever we want. We will give them the quiet wisdom of the cattle. That's really was his attitude towards other people. So he really was an elitist and like that. But yeah, really something else.
And what do the globalists do now? Don't they treat the population that's not part of the aristocracy as cattle?
Yes, useless eaters. It's the same
Yep.
attitude. Just
Yep.
like, and I
Georgia
mean,
Guidestones.
exactly. And you can see kind of like the same bleed over into like, I really lead up to George Bush Sr., Crowley, and if you read Prophet of Evil. And you just see their similar outlooks, aristocratic, top of the heap, you know, who cares about other people? We give them drugs and quiet wisdom. That's why the whole like educational system was morphed and deliberately changed by the elite in the United States into kind of like a one where you are a human resource. You're not like a classically trained person with methods of how to think critically. I mean, you once you get old enough, you realize how much they left out intentionally into our public education system. But the private school kids get a completely different education as well. They get trained in Greek and Latin and things like that.
Right. And, Kinsey was funded by Rockefeller, and Kinsey hopped a plane immediately upon hearing that Crowley had died to go pick up his diaries and the damage that Kinsey has done, saying pedophilia is enjoyable for the children. And table 34 of his book is so disgusting, you almost can't hear people have a discussion about it. And I'm talking
Didn't you?
intellectual doctors. Yep, go ahead, Mrs. Doubtfeiser.
I think I heard Oprah Winfrey say something similar in an interview
What did she say?
that as a child, when you're molested, it's enjoyable.
Yeah, when she was interviewing those boys that, or
No,
that
somebody
man.
was interviewing her.
Oh, because in her
She
documentary
was
about,
molested as a
okay,
child.
yes, I know that. And she did a documentary on Michael Jackson and interviewed the man now that supposedly was having this relationship. And she famously says, what do you do about that? Because when you're being stimulated, it's pleasurable, right? So, and that all came from Kinsey. It's very dark, and they paid him to do this. And then, Lucis Trust picks up the torch and does, Alice Bailey's 10-point plan for the education system. And if you Google that and take a look at that, you will see Crowley's influence in those 10 items.
Wow. Wow, interesting. I'll have to check that out, the 10-point plan.
Yes, I have a picture of it somewhere. I don't have it up where I can share it right now because it's buried somewhere in my photos. But you can just it's online everywhere. Alice Bailey's 10-point plan, Lucis Trust. Look at that, and then look at our education system and what they've done with graphic sex education materials. That's directly influenced from Kinsey, who loved Crowley and was one of his contemporaries. This is why all of this, I think, is like super important and vital to bring out right now, because we're in and chaos. Chaos is a big part of this magic system that Crowley used in the movie Lucifer Rising. Chaos is one of the words that's on the magic circle on the floor.
Hmm.
So they want to incite chaos and violence and unrest and all this crap that we're dealing with right now.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing. Like it's literally they're pushing Luciferianism. It's interesting reading Kinsey. He came to the same conclusion after all of his research as Crowley. You can do whatever you want. Nothing's harmful. What there's no barriers or boundaries. And he was a sick man. He was a very sick man. Interestingly, he traveled to the Abbey of Fatima with Kenneth Anger. So it's a strange kind of overlap between Anger and Manson and Kinsey, who never would release his research. Like it was not ever analyzed in the scientific method by third parties. And there's pretty good arguments that he made it all up. Well, who played off the Kinsey research, which is most likely entirely fake? Harry Hay, who literally played the organ at Jack Parsons' Ritual Magic OTO worship sessions doing the Gnostic mass, takes off of Kinsey and starts the gay rights movement with a secret society but called the Mattachine Society, and likes Crowley and likes the imagery, the lightning bolts, the satanic view of the lightning bolt, and all this stuff. It's really true. And Crowley's ideas kind of pervades this two spirit stuff, this androgyny. This is all can be traced back through Kinsey and Crowley. There's no question about it.
Yeah, there's a documentary called Table 34 where people do it's a 30-minute documentary, and it's sociologists, like sex therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, things like that. People well, degreed, right, are having a discussion about Table 34, and it's really difficult to watch. I had to pause it a lot because it's really horrific, honestly. And all it is a discussion about Table 34 in Kinsey's book. Now, I want to bring out one of the things that is paramount to this magical system and Lucis Trust, Alice Bailey, this whole thing, and even the one IWAS poster that says love under will, love under law, or something. They took and I think it started actually with Blavatsky, and then of course her acolyte was, Bailey, and then Annie Besant. But they're the ones that coined the love and light. But if you listen to Christine Morgan, the president of Lucis Trust, in that interview on YouTube that we definitely need to discuss, the interview with Christine Morgan on YouTube, she says our Christ, because they have Christ consciousness, our Christ is not the Christ of Christians.
Right.
And our love is not a romantic or familial love. Our love is the force of magnetism, and
Wow.
light is Lucifer. And they have been on a mission to bring Lucifer back into his rightful place as the light of the world, because she doesn't say this exactly, but this is my paraphrase. Lucifer got a bad rap.
Wow. It's incredible.
It is incredible. It's pervasive. It's taken, when I was, when I first got into, oh my gosh, my first book, that I ever read on witchcraft and magic and ESP and that kind of, I was like 12 years old. So because I was born with the ability to see into the spirit realm, and that's incredibly terrifying as a child, okay? Because you have to learn to turn that off. All right, it's not great to see everything that's beyond the veil, that's in the supernatural realm, the astral plane, which Crowley talks about with his women became, his oracles during ritual, and they would share their visions. Of course, they were under drug inducement and, the sexual abusive sexual nature of the quote sex magic that he performed all brings your adrenaline and all that stuff up to a heightened level, and increases, if you have any kind of ability like that. And so he used his women as oracles to give him messages from, like the demonic realm. It's really fascinating and terrible.
Some of the writing exists where he's using them as mediums, and then he writes it down and asks questions, and he really was doing all that stuff. And there's like there's pictures of his astral travel. He believed he could astrally communicate with people around the world through the astral body. So all that stuff to Crowley, I think, was real.
Well, William, it is a real phenomenon. Many people experience it. When I first came to Twitter in 2009, and that was the tail end of my being in it, and I came in under my magical name. I had business under that name, and that sort of thing. Um, People would come onto Twitter and message me and tell me that I was in their dreams and I was helping them. I That's another thing. I was really born being able to leave my body and roam around the astral realms And that was another thing that I had to, learn how to stop that. There are, a lot of times it's generational. There are these certain supernatural proclivities or gifts. And if you have a little bit of it, that's one of the things I think draws people in to this kind of dark magic is seeking to understand what it is that you're experiencing and seeing, and um can you work with it? Then I met people who encouraged me to work with, and encouraged me to accept my experiences of, UFO experiences, abductee experiences. I've had all of that, and that goes completely along with what Crowley believed and wrote about and studied. And it's just incredible the people that are still willingly and knowingly practicing these types of things right now for the manifestation of their own power and wealth and that sort of thing. The contracts with the devil, with Satan, that's not a joke either. You can make agreements with these entities, but then see you have to decide morally what you will accept and what you won't accept, what you'll do and what you won't do. And uh, I just believe that now, actually, at my age and everything, I now believe that I was meant to come to the side of God so that I could witness and share what I've experienced and come out of. So that thank you so much, William, for your work and for doing these spaces with me, because I think that it's really important right now.
I think you're right. It's really important because I think they're seeping all this stuff in from the secret chief, just like you said. This whole UFO deception is a deception. It's a spiritual deception, and it's to sneak in these Luciferian ideas and all this stuff tied to Crowley, Blavatsky, Bailey, and Bassett, just like you said.
Yeah, because even Hitler, and I cannot find this movie anywhere. There was a movie that was made in 2017 called The Maria Orsic Story. Maria Orsic was Hitler's medium. And she famously patented the first UFO. She patented it and she got it from her beings from Aldebaran. But you can't get this movie. No one can get it. 2017, and it's not available anywhere. Why?
Wow, I never heard that. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yep, the Maria Orsic story. Go ahead and look it up. 2017. You can't get your hands on that movie. I even I even tried Kim.com.
Uh,
He didn't answer me, but I thought, if anybody could get their hands on a copy of this movie and I would have paid whatever, right? I mean, I probably wouldn't have paid $1,000, but I might have paid a couple $100 to get my hands on this movie. I really want to see it because, like I said, she patented the first UFO, and we know about the Nazi bell, but Maria Orsic was Hitler's medium. That was her job. So
wow.
anyway, yeah. So we have Reba
Well,
has a question for. Oh, go ahead, William, and then we'll go to Reba.
do you know that Hitler, after World War One, he ended up in a sanitarium, like a mental institution?
I did not know that.
Do you know that there's a story while he was in that mental institution, he was visited by a being of light, supposedly, and that's where his change of personality possibly began, and that was where he got the ideas to save Hitler. And apparently, on his bedside table, he had Blavatsky's Secret Teachings or something like that. No, was one of her books, was it Isis?
Isis Unveiled.
Yeah. And
Yes, Isis Unveiled.
I haven't
Correct.
been able to to confirm that, but it is really something else. Wow.
It's certainly a legend that it was on his bedside table, but you can find research and documentaries where Hitler was looking. He actually sent troops. It's one of the reasons why he was interested in Antarctica. He was looking for the secret chiefs, the ascended masters. He wanted to find, supposedly they were underground. I've heard they were in Mount Shasta. I mean, you hear these things.
Right.
And that was Hitler was looking for them. He wanted to find them, and that was one of his side goals. So, I mean, this is wild. Anyway, Reba, do you have a question?
No, I missed a whole lot. I just requested a speaker this so I could, I don't know, if
So you could
something,
hang out up here?
yes, something came to mind,
Reba,
I could say
welcome to the
something.
space.
Thanks.
Okay. You probably are really getting an earful, aren't you? Uh,
It's
um,
interesting and intriguing for sure, but I missed out on a lot of it. But
Okay,
that's
well,
okay.
it's recorded, and the first space that William and I did last week is also recorded, so you can go back and listen to them and take notes and get on your browser and look up these things that we're talking about if you want to connect some dots. Because the big dots that my goal here with William, the big dots that I want to connect is dark, occult, esoteric, magic, UFOs, and this hyper sexualized pedophilia culture.
Okay. So I got a question. You're not you're not pushing this. You're
Oh,
just
no,
bringing.
no, no. We're exposing this,
Okay.
Reba.
All right. Just
Yes, we're exposing the dark side here. All right.
gotcha.
Thanks. So I think I like to do, just about a 90-minute space. So William, what else would you like to, say or, tell us about your sites and some of your other work and things that are standing out to you? Just kind of give us a little something.
Yeah, I have like five. You can see all my documentaries. You mentioned them earlier. All you have to do is go to Patreon. It's $5. You can watch all five of them after you pay. It's very, I think, reasonable. There's a lot of information. If you're a visual learner, I think they're for you because you can just kind of see the images and stuff like that in place, faces to the names of some of the stuff I've talked about. And some of them are long. You can see the 3.5 hour one I did on Smiley Face Killers. I also post ad free talks and things like that, or people I've interviewed on my Patreon, so you can watch stuff ad free there as well. And my website's a good way to contact me. And then my podcast is in the top point 0.5 podcasts in the world. And there's a lot of different topics and subjects and things like that. And I'm just kind of always kind of staying busy working and working on other projects. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. A lot of the stuff I did and research because I didn't know much about it. And I've done a lot of stuff on the UFOs and the UFO phenomenon and the fake, disclosure, disclosure as deception too. So like Doors of Deception is kind of the perfect word, the perfect title for your show, Dori, because these are doors of deception. Like the disclosure is fake. They're just deceiving you that it's a real disclosure. And
And of
eventually,
course, I chose that name as the opposite of Doors of Perception because Aldous Huxley was one of Timothy Leary's acolytes. So, as opposing the Doors of Perception, I wanted to bring out the things that are doors of deception. So, thank you for mentioning that on X here. Not everybody is familiar, although I did put Doors of Deception on my banner now. But William, I did notice in your documentary about Aleister Crowley, Children of the Beast, there's a picture that you show of the some of the things that Crowley painted on the walls, I think at the Abbey of the Lima or Boleskine somewhere. And there's a thing, it's a smile. And then in the smiley face killers, that started out with they were leaving smiley faces. And in Lucifer Rising, Osiris drops six figures into the water to stir up like the angel of the whirlwind or something. I mean, this is wild stuff, guys.
Yeah. No, he does that, and then the UFOs appear, right?
Yes, then the UFOs
Yeah.
come. Yes.
I can never get a proper interpretation of that. Why is he dropping these figurines like they're human figurines in water, and how does that summon the entities? I don't know.
Well, there's something to it, and there is a little bit. I think I mentioned it last time that I recently came across. Oh yeah, that book I sent you, Spells and Ceremonial Magic. That Tony Cale uh, has used her work for his work on. And you know him from before on our podcasting days and stuff, but in her book of the top 10 black magic uh tomes or books or whatever, I was reading where water is an acceptable substitute for blood. And I'm wondering if that is, so you're killing these strong, handsome, intelligent men. You're dumping them in water, and how many years has the smiley face killer phenomenon been going on, William?
The first known case I think is 97, but it may go back even before that. But that's kind of like the starting point where people say, "Hey, this is really starting to happen."
Yes, and so who knows? I mean, that group of people that's abducting men and then dumping them in water, they may be a Crowleyan type cult globally, because these people now can communicate because we have the internet, on the dark web and such. And William's interviews that he does on his podcast that are also available on his Patreon, he interviews the people that are writing about all of these things. And so, very compelling, very interesting. If this is a topic that you want to learn more about, please protect yourself properly with spiritual warfare prayers and protection before you delve into some of these dark places. See, I came out of this place, and again, am so grateful for it, very grateful for it, because I don't want to be on the wrong side when it all goes down, or when the end of my life comes. I don't want to say I am perplexed, which is allegedly what Alistair's last words, William.
All right, very good. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. And LaVey said something similar, right? Oh no, something's very wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something is very wrong. And part of this is that I want to warn people. I want to get their antennas up and pinging to what this is. And I know this is a deep, dark subject. It's very deep. It's very convoluted who's connected to who. But I want to unravel it for people so that they can pick up some of the data points, and it'll start to make sense, and dot connecting will happen, and hopefully people will realize some of the deceptions that were created by Crowley and Blavatsky and Bailey have seeped into our world very heavily just right now, as we're living it right now. So very important work, William. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you again. And we'll have to
Thank
do
you.
another show. We didn't get to the Collins Elite, but I'll reach out to Nick Redfern. He wrote a book about them, and I think maybe that could be our next stream.
Perfect, because that is something I wanted to talk about, and I forgot to ask you. Yes, so our next space will do the Collins Elite.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Nick Redfern and maybe have a few minutes for us. We can both ask him questions or something like that, or you can host. I'll just sit alongside.
Well, you can co-host too, and you might want to learn how to use the buttons because who knows, you might want to have your own space one of these days
I'm
or
learning.
something.
I didn't know it, so it's very handy. It's easier for me because I can just sit down and sit by the phone. It's a lot easier than staring at a screen for an hour.
Right. And I usually don't do lives on here, but I'm thinking if I want to try doing an X Space live, I would definitely want to try it with you, William, because
Yeah, I
I've known
already
you for a
do.
long time.
One of the things that I do is I use StreamYard and then stream right to X, and then you can also stream it to other sites if you want. But you don't even have to use the X platform per se. StreamYard's free too, as long as you don't. I think they give you a certain amount per month that you can stream. But it's pretty cool. I'll show you how to use StreamYard. It's easier than you think. You don't even have to download any software. It runs just right through your browser.
Wow. You
Yeah.
know what? That'd be terrific because we know that I dipped out on tech for a long time.
No, I'll show you. It's like literally plug and play, 2 clicks. If you know how to click through a link, it's almost that simple. You just have to have a good internet connection and a decent mic, and you're good to go. You don't even need a camera.
Perfect.
Yeah,
That's
I'll show you how to
amazing.
do it. That'll be our next step.
Okay, sounds
Right.
really good, William. I appreciate you so much. I
Likewise.
yes. All right, thank you everyone for coming. Remember the space is recorded so you can share it out afterwards. I would encourage you again if this is a topic of interest and you're seeing weird things globally and you're wondering how in the hell did this ever get started? I think we've started a little bit of thrown some breadcrumbs in the forest for you to follow. And so the other space that we did would be on my and you can search for William Ramsey investigates. If you go to my profile and hit search, just put in William and you'll probably get the space that we did last week. Okay, thank you everyone. Happy Thursday. Good night. God bless and go forth and dig. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Doubtfeiser.
Yeah. Thanks, Dory. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Dory.
Yep.
Everybody have a
Thanks,
great
all.
evening.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, William. A lot of good information.